Well, I am thrilled. It's my pleasure to welcome the esteemed Casey Adams, joining us from Degreed. Casey, could you, for the folks that don't know you or weren't present at your Prezo yesterday, intro a little bit about your role at Degreed, sort of your tenure and your focus?
Sure. It's interesting. So, I got a chance yesterday to spend some time talking about our state of skills research we've been doing at Degreed and just kind of unpacking what's happening as we look at the skills that are happening to build roles and these like dynamic global changes that are happening, the way that roles are changing, the way that work is changing, the kinds of things organizations need to build. And I'm really fortunate. At Degreed today, I get to spend most of my time actually talking to customers and folks around the globe about how do you change these learning ecosystems and this whole concept of evaluating and measuring the experiences that people have and the skills that have grown out of those experiences over the life of our entire careers. And even before that, the things that have made us who we are at the foundational core, our skills and what we can do. And so it's been really fun. I do that day in, day out. And yeah, I guess traditionally, so today I'm the vice president of our global business solutions team, kind of consulting group, sales engineering team. But it's been a really interesting career. I mean, for me, I think what's so fun for me about this conversation is I think I sort of exemplify what the modern workforce looks like today. Someone who has no real progression in like a normal competency track. Yeah, I went to college to get some accounting degrees. I got into auditing. I made a good transition to training because that makes sense. And then I got into starting a software company and video analytics and back into training and now sales engineering. So
the nature of coverage, left, right, center.
The nature of coverage, and so it's so fun for me to be able to look at the research we're doing is realizing that the world is made up of people like me, people that have these really disparate roles and experiences. And through that, we've learned a lot and we can do a lot, but you don't have great ways as an organization to understand what skills those are and what that looks like and how to put it to work. So I think that's where this becomes exciting, is that it finally takes a look at what the learner cares about and what you've done as an individual.
Yeah, I think it's intriguing. We're in this spot where shelf life of skills, maybe 2 to 3 years. First
Sure.
time in the history, I think, of our sort of multiple generations. We're talking careers for 6 decades, changing radically like yours. And I know this is hot off the press research that you all just executed. What are some of the big salient points that stand out for you? That State of Skills 2021, I know you did a phenomenal presentation, exceedingly well attended yesterday here on day one, but play forward for us and for those listening, some of those sort of key tenets that really stood out.
I think a couple of the things that were really fascinating to me when I read this is, in the learning and HR space for years now, we've been talking about this shelf life of skills, like you mentioned, but what we found out of the research is post-COVID, 6 in 10 of the people that we interviewed actually identified that they have a desperate, urgent need to upskill or get new skills in order to stay consistent or relevant in the market. And so really the way I look at this is that now what's happened is all this stuff we knew, now all of a sudden our employees know. And they're like, wait a second, there's this urgent need. I gotta go get some new skills. This is important for me now. And so now they look at L&D teams and they go, wait a second, now I expect you to help me. The other side of this that I thought was really interesting is about 46% of the respondents globally said they also don't believe that their employers are more likely to lay them off than they are to actually reskill or redeploy them. And so there's this all of a sudden this shift where people realized, oh man, this is real. And my company is not fully prepared to help me take that next step in my journey.
What does that mean for the folks, obviously this critical focus on internal mobility, on retaining talent, the nature of the Great Resignation being something real, not just spoken about and published about, but how do you see some of your clients addressing this? And some of ours are shared clients, but how are they going about approaching that? They're ahead of the game, they're far behind the 8 ball, they're looking for you saying, good Lord, Degreed, how can you help us in this process?
Sure. So a lot of times we get to talking to people and ask this question, like, Casey, we get it, there's this urgent change, we have to change. An urgent need we have to change, and they go, what do I do next? And they'll go, well, let me go read your research. And they read some research, and there's great data, and we can talk about the different demographic changes, and there's challenges in terms of cognitive skills and technical skills that are emerging, and things that different industries or different countries need to, being prioritized. But the reality is that the answer to that question is a lot more personal. I think what's changing in customers that are doing this well is they're realizing that this global data is a nice starting point. But what they really need to do is rethink the way that they evaluate the work that needs to get done in a company. So all of a sudden what this is it's no longer a strategic initiative. You say, hey, we're going to move into fully automating these processes in the next 2 years. Well, what that means is I need a series of people in my organization who can do these things, which means I need these skills for our engineering team. I need these new skills for our customer service team. I need these new skills for the way that we deploy project deployment or whatever. So when we start to break down these business level initiatives and these transformational changes, or even the major disruptions that happened through COVID, people are now starting to break down the business like initiatives into skill-based like atoms, right? And say, these are the atomic elements we need to actually execute this. And so now when they're being able to measure that and value that, that sort of becomes this demand side. This is the demand of skills we need. Now we can go tackle the supply side in a more personalized way for our business.
It's not just this broad, overarching, sort of genericized approach to generalized skill libraries, making it personal for individuals, for geos, for functions, and for companies as a whole. I think that's kind of where
it is. And I think that's one of the things we've challenged. And is, you know, like I said earlier, I spent a lot of my career in learning, and it was always around managing learning, right? A lot of our technologies here are around managing and distributing learning. And really what this shift has really opened up, and I think we spend a lot of time thinking about, is at the core of all this is an individual. And I think one of the things that's really different about skills and the skills you bring to the market is that this is a data set that's rich and valuable for us, but as an organization, it's the one data set you don't own. This is all the skills you have. Skills are owned by the individual. They own that skill, and it's up to them to understand where to keep those up to date and how to manage those and what their behavior is going to be to sort of leverage and transact on that. Our job as an entity is to understand how to synchronize where all that information is, pull it together, and then maximize it so that we can actually transact on it. So it's a really interesting balance, because we can't control that data anymore. It's data in the wild, and so now we have to figure out different ways, different technologies to use it, but that's all user-centric, not company-centric, and that's a big shift.
A massive one. I was intrigued by some of the research, and I'm not sure if you touched on this in the work you did, but coming out of WEF recently, talking about what are the top 12 skills in demand, and maybe we were initially thinking, wow, it's all about STEM, and that's the focus, and I think reality, especially going through COVID, about some of the softer power skills tied to resiliency and empathetic listening and thoughtful leadership and inclusivity in that kind of a setting, those are bubbling to the top now, even for engineering groups or other areas. What are you seeing as for some of the big bets that folks are making in terms of skill areas of focus? Because you sit on a wealth of data, both you have it and your clients have it. What's standing out there?
A couple of things. I think the first thing is that you see this sort of need for, I'll call it everyone, to have technical skills. Those technical skills vary. I think it varies a little, but there's this emerging need that it's no longer acceptable not to have some level of technical skills. And so whether that's some basic level of programming or just even basic data literacy, so understanding databases and data structures and APIs and the way that systems integrate and talk to each other, and creating visualizations or whatever that looks like. So there's this data literacy that is sort of a new mandate across the
table stakes.
And so there's some things that are more general we want to bring up, right? And then there's some things that are very tactical. So you have some very specific role-based things, data science, emerging different programming technologies and languages, but that again depends on sort of the market you're in, right? You may be in a SaaS market for consumer-based products, or you might be building blockchains, right? Well, there's a whole emerging set of new blockchain languages coming out that are very different than what are being taught in sort of your basic engineering programs. And so what we're starting to see is definitely some emerging and some hard skills they're very important. But more than this is, especially post-COVID, is a big reliance on the social skills. I mean, really, I know it sounds silly and you're like, these human skills matter, but they really do, especially that we've disrupted the way we work.
No doubt.
Because now we're doing it through one of these. We're doing it through a screen. It's asynchronous, and it's just and that may not change. And it may change a little bit, but it's not going to go back to the way it had been. And so I think that's a big challenge, where people realize those human skills are not even the same ones we used to have, because building rapport through a screen is very difficult. And so you have to really rethink the way you do this. So yeah, there's a couple of those trends that I think are coming out.
We talked for a second about maybe some exemplar clients. I know that we share a couple in mind when I focus on human skills, and someone like Cemex comes to mind, who's powering their entire academies, whether that's leadership development, supply chain, natures of safety academies, where they've got a brilliant aspect of continuous skill development, reskilling, upskilling happening in degree pathways, and then some of the cohort-based, immersive, deep, continuous capability building in NovoEd. What are there some others that come to mind that you think that are absolutely have nailed it and are doing it right, kind of in your space, whether you say their names or not?
Sure. Well, and continuing on the Cemex deal, I think it's really interesting, because what you've got is a company that is really trying to be very progressive in the way that they think about building skill and capabilities across all of their different domains. And so it's one of the things that, this is detour, it's not what you asked me, but one of the things I think is a challenge for us in learning is, for so often we have in the areas that are important, we've had these high potential candidates, and we in every discipline, whether they're hard skill disciplines, leadership disciplines, and we just focus on that. And we select few, and then we just forget about the rest of the 10,000 people that work for us. And so what I think is really neat about their model and others that are doing this well is they've said, hey, we understand there's this urgent need, we've got to establish skills. So it's becoming a place where really proactively you can begin to establish targets and skills in all these different disciplines and give people the freedom to learn the way they want. And so I think most of this is really about shifting to this open ecosystem and having the courage as a company to say, you can have this. You can go learn over here, take this class, engage with a mentor, go deep in some content from the richest content providers, or go out to the industry and find things. And we're gonna give you the freedom to do that, and then we'll allow you to sort of showcase what that means for us later. So I think they've done a really remarkable job. I mean, one of the companies I brought up yesterday, from some interesting publications they've had over the last year publicly was Verizon. I thought what was so fascinating about them through COVID is a couple of different publications they put out, but they didn't lay off any of their 135,000 employees, right? And instead they retrained about 20,000 of these folks, and as they shuttered retail stores all over the place, they understood they had these great skills in customer service, be able to handle conflict, technical training, sales, and they said they have all the skills we need to keep running our business, and we need those. So they were ready to move those folks back into chat and phone support and mail and text support, whatever it looked like. But that wasn't by accident. So the thing that made it so inspiring is they actually there's a Boston Consulting white paper that came out talking through sort of their 4-wave plan of how Verizon planned for this. And they 2 years ago said, we are going to reskill 500,000 people in these new skills over the next 7 years. And here's what that plan looks like. And this is how it's agile, this is how it's adaptable. And we're not saying we know what the answer is, we're saying we're prepared for whatever the question is. And so when this happened, they were immediately ready to have systems, solutions, and the mindset within the leadership team and the organization to say, hey, it's time to reskill and to do this. And everybody said, oh, okay, we already built a plan for that. And so the thing that really stands out for me is that we always talk about planning makes this important, but it's really hard to disrupt what you've always done, right? Some of these companies are hundreds of years old, and to disrupt this learning model that has worked for so long, you just don't want to do it because it disrupts what you know. And so this takes a very different mindset shift from leadership, from learning, and for your employees to be ready to take this on. And I think that their pre-planning was just an incredible example of what it's going to take for companies to say, hey, we're going to make the commitment to not be caught off guard by a crisis, whatever that crisis is.
Yeah, I think there's part of that in March of 2020, I think you were allowed to sort of give some leeway to corporations who got caught off guard. But now, 18 months later, I don't think people are allowed to be fooled.
No.
I mean, certainly as L&D organizations, we don't get that luxury anymore. And I love your comment about intentionality and purposeful design, thinking about how you tackle this and see it as an opportunity to revisit decades-old approaches to sort of closing the door with inside L&D and now let it be in service of the entire firm, the entire population, the entire workforce, which is brilliant. Let me give you the last word. I know we're at day 2 of ATD. We've got 1 day to go. Big parting shot, anything you'd love to sort of see, you're looking forward to sort of in these closing hours and closing day of this event, or words of wisdom for folks out there embarking on this journey of revisiting their skilling and their experiences?
No, one of the first things I would say, I'm just really excited for the people that did come. I know it's exciting to be back, but it's we're almost there, and it's exciting to see people. I thank them, but for the folks that haven't, I think the challenge would be understanding how do we keep this conversation going in sort of the asynchronous world. I mean, we're here today, and it's not as busy as it has been in years past, and I think that's what we're going to start to see. And so I think the challenge is sometimes you don't get to have this dialogue, but that doesn't change the need to really rethink and redesign the way you do learning. So just because you're not having the conversation twice a year, 3 times a year at an ATD event in person, doesn't mean we're off the hook from rethinking and re-engineering. And what I would hope that people start to do as we look at what's changing in our markets is we really got to start rethinking the way we evaluate talent pools and thinking it's not the job you had or the person I worked for. We've got to get rid of that recency bias, the network bias, and move to this environment where we understand people for the skills they have and start understanding, how do I build that? How do I connect with them? And then how do I scale that? Because this has to be a scalable model where I leverage the right technologies and the right solutions, the right content for my industry and for the needs I have, and realize that you can't do this with sort of one thing. And that's why I think we sit here together as partners, and we do this. I know you guys do this with lots of other folks even here at this show, that the partnership approach is important because your teams are very different, right? You have a different industry which is very specific, but some of your functions, your accounting functions are very similar to other accounting functions, and there's ways to optimize for that. And so I just think about the openness of the ecosystem and the willingness to say, hey, we can't keep doing what we've been doing because the research it's not going to support us. We will not be able to answer the questions that our leadership needs us to do and our business needs. So yeah, I think we just encourage people to keep asking questions and don't get lazy. I don't want to say lazy. Don't be lax. There's things that are emerging and shifting. If we can't get caught off guard again, I think the next time there's a crisis, if we haven't pre-planned for that, that's shame on us.
No doubt.
We know what to prepare for, and I think we can be there. So yeah, but this is exciting. It's fun to be here, and it's been a great show so far. The speakers have been outstanding, and
I love it.
yeah.
The power of learning together, the power of partnering together means a lot.
I love it. It's been great to be here. It's unreal to be able to connect with people and have those real conversations.
Casey Adams from Degree. Can't thank you enough.
Hey, thanks, Todd. Appreciate it.
Appreciate the time.
All right. Yep.